Welcome everyone to another episode of the Organized Chaos Cafe. And today I have a technology leader. He's an AI strategist who helps in the IT, finance, and operations area with leaders leading the next wave of digital transformation. He's also the creator of the AI Control Tower. It's a one-stop shop for visibility for all of your AI pieces and whatever it's doing. He's born and raised in the UK, and my guest, he's a self-proclaimed nerd and geek. I'm one too. And ever since he started coding on his Commodore 64, he's been using his skills to also begin his enterprise consulting with Deloitte, Ernst & Young, where he spent over a decade leading global technology and process improvement programs before immigrating to Canada in 2005. Over the past 25 years, he's helped hundreds of CFOs, COOs, CIOs accelerate their growth, streamline operations, and unlock visibility across their organizations. And outside of work, he also trains his border collie Kyla in dog agility, cranks up 80s metal, and watches sci-fi movies that have inspired his love for storytelling and future. I'd love to go and welcome my next guest, John Hetherington. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
For sure. Thanks, Ben. From one nerd to another. I love the intro. My reputation precedes me.
No, I mean, you've been doing a lot of things, and I've also worked with you in the past on a lot of different projects and such too. So we have a bit of a rapport already. But what's always interested me is just, you're also into this world of AI. AI has been doing so many different things. And now you're helping a lot of different organizations be able to go and harness that. So, I mean, overall, how's that been for you? We're in 2026 now, and it seems like, well, that bubble hasn't burst yet. But how's that going for you, working with organizations? What are their biggest struggles?
So the biggest problem I'm seeing right now, which actually born the AI Control Tower, was the need to know who's using AI for what, why, and which data. Mm-hmm. And this might sound a bit boring, but what we're finding is that a lot of people are spending a lot of money on AI, and there was a challenge around, okay, are we getting our full money's worth from it? So I was talking to the CIO just late last year, and even in the Microsoft Copilot Studio, where a lot of AI agents are built in the Microsoft suite, it's actually quite difficult to report who's using it, how often. So we built a control tower, which means you can find out how many users, who's using it, what for, and when. And if nothing else, we find it really good for just rewarding engagement with AI, getting people to use your AI, getting people to use the functionality. And then you can do on-the-spot prizes like a weekly coffee gift card or something to recognize the highest user per week.
Right. Okay, interesting. It's almost like you're creating something to micromanage AI a little bit. You don't want to micromanage your employees, but AI is something where you kind of want to know what it's thinking, what it's doing. Is it doing something it shouldn't be doing? Those are kind of the concerns that I think some of the organizations have, right?
Yeah, exactly that. Because anyone can build a AI agent or start customizing their Copilot or Gemini or any tool they have. So what we found is, okay, how do we know who's doing that? Because there is a cost to the organization. You have a Copilot license, which has a number of seats, but the more data you use, the more transactions, more tokens, the cost increases. And then more importantly, who's making decisions on that data and what are they using that data for? Because typically in an organization before AI, you would run a decision or a report by a team before it's published. Right. With AI, it's speeding up that, and people don't always have the time to review it. So we're giving that visibility and clarity.
Cool. So I guess today, we're going to talk a little about AI, but also about just IT projects in general and how can they turn into a beast. But I guess from AI projects versus, we'll say, large IT projects, let's say ERP implementations, right? How are those two different beasts, would you say, that organizations need to tackle?
Interesting question. So when you look at any sort of technology change, and this comes from 30 odd years similar to you doing this, is any sort of implementation of a new software tool, ERP to AI, has the same similar implementation approach of planning it, testing it, rolling it out, make sure there's adoption, usage and training. But the scale is very different. So in terms of your key question around the difference, AI projects tend to be smaller, they're faster because anyone can just get stuck in and use it immediately. We have it on our phones. We have lots of free versions available. When you get into enterprise ERP scale projects, they're on a much bigger, as you know, a much bigger scale. So the approach is still the same, but what we find is with AI projects is anything, it's not actually about AI. It's about the problem to solve. It's about the process. It's about what growth or change are we trying to make in the organization and where can AI fit, if at all. There's this massive jump on let's just do AI, but in reality, it might be just remove this set of approvals from a process to streamline the financial close, for example. So it's being more selective about when you use AI, and that's a whole different level of skill.
Right. And that's where I think maybe even it's like the business analysts and making sure, hey, are we tackling the right problem, or are we trying to find a problem for AI to tackle, which I think is also a technology problem, right? Hey, we found this new tool. Let's try and solve it with something. And then you're kind of like, well, now we got a tool. It's just added more clunky things for us to go and manage and do for the organization, right? So I think that's always a bit of a cautionary tale. And, I think everyone knows I'm all about the superheroes and their origin stories and whatnot. And I know you've also worked through a lot of technology projects as well, but what moments for you has been part of that guiding piece of going into your superhero origin story?
Yeah, so I always go back to a first digital transformation project that I had early in my career, which actually failed. So what happened is I built an AI black box back in the year 2000. So this is .com boom coming out of year 2K, millennium bug. And I'll always remember the moment where I sat in front of the leadership team at the big long table. Everyone had said this project is awesome, we'd increase revenue, and I couldn't wait to hear the recognition from the leadership team. But what actually happened is they told me they were canceling the project. And I was sideswiped. I couldn't talk. I felt embarrassed because you've just spent months on a project and it's now being cancelled by leadership. I walked into the room expecting a promotion and pay rise, but it was quite the opposite. And so I didn't even get a chance to speak. I was just, my words caught in my throat as the leadership said it was cancelled. And the reason is because the customer satisfaction had gone down. So even though revenue had gone up for the company with this direct selling life insurance product using AI, the customer satisfaction had gone down. And this company was known as the Friendly Society. So I learned a really hard, important lesson on that day, that it's not just about whether you can, it's about whether you should, based on the values of the company and the goals. And their goals was to increase customer satisfaction through in-person meetings, conversations, relationships. And my AI product actually took that away because it made it direct insurance.
Right.
So my big lesson learned there is, well, there was a silver lining, which was awesome because we got to license that direct insurance product to another direct insuring company. So they got to do it on the online, and we got revenue from the licensing. And funnily enough, the company I work for that focused on friendly in-person meetings actually subsequently went out of business in late 2005. So there's a cautionary tale there as well.
Interesting. So, I mean, it sounds like that could have been either your hero origin story or maybe it's your villain story. I don't know. It could swing either way depending on how you take it, right?
Yes. I mean, I like to think I was the hero on that one because it did come out with a solution to license the product elsewhere. But yeah, the villain was the not knowing the true goals of the product, which I learned the hard way. And like I said, that's framed everything I do ever since.
Yeah, and I guess that was interesting. I know it's probably taking you way back, but when you were first on the project and you're trying to go through it, was that customer satisfaction piece ever part of the metrics of what you were measuring, or part of the strategic objectives that you needed to go and align your project to? Was that ever on the table?
No, it wasn't. It's a great point because the CIO charged me with doing this project. Go talk to marketing, build out this life insurance quote website, an e-commerce site, and I just went and did it. I was full steam. Let's go build this out. Couldn't wait to get it live. So lesson learned for me is, although I had direct instructions and goals and clarity from the leaders that I was working with, there are other leaders in the organization who had other goals, customer satisfaction, that were rated higher. And that's the making sure you engage everyone as much as possible and doing that sense check of what you're actually delivering, which I know sounds obvious,
Right.
but when you're in the heat of the moment, excited. I mean, I was just out of university, so I was, let's go. I can't wait to deliver this.
Well, that's always the hard way to learn, right? Of just, did you ask that question? No, I didn't. And so you're left with whatever it is that comes out. Because it can very easily, and I think sometimes the mentality can be shifted where you're thinking it from a victim perspective of like, it's not my fault. I didn't do that. That's totally everyone else's fault. I did everything fine. Right. And you don't really progress with your own growth and things like that. And at the same time, I think the villain portion of where it could come into projects, people like to think it's the people, but there can be so many different things involved with it, right? I mean, what are the villains that you've seen inside of your projects?
Yeah. So my big one was, as I started to grow my career, get busier in bigger projects and have more projects to look after and get to a portfolio and then a program, is I learned about delegation. So my villain was delegation, and not in the traditional sense of delegating properly. So what I learned is, at the time, delegate as much as you can, from my mentor at the time saying, you can't do everything, John. Delegate as much as you can to your team, and that'll free you up to take on all this work. And I was handing out tasks like candy. Here you go, hoping that we're done. Who's available? Who's next in line in the office? They got the next task. And what I learned is that didn't get the results. Again, big hard lesson earlier in my career, just giving out work and tasks is not delegation. I was delegating but you don't relegate the task. You don't hand over responsibility. It's still with you.
Right.
So you have to support them in that delivery. So it's about the outcomes of what they want to achieve, not the task itself. So I remember that vividly in terms of suddenly having all this task delivered, but they were not right. And I was spending even more time redelegating everything again and again and again. And it just got worse.
Right.
So I always delegate now with a definition of done. That was one of my mantras going forward is, what is the definition of done? And specifically in terms of the 3 Fs, so the facts, the feelings, and the functionality. So what are the facts? What do I need this task, this report, this outcome to achieve, whether it's metrics? What is the feeling? So what am I going to take from this report or presentation? How is it going to make me feel confident to present to leadership? And then what's the functionality? Is it going to be in a PowerPoint format? Am I going to use it, send it via email to the board? Am I going to create a website out of it? So using those facts, feelings, and functionality for a definition of done really helps the delegation in the right way.
Okay, that's really cool. So you got that 3F framework on there. And I guess if you don't do that 3F framework, you're going to get that 4th F from the person you've delegated to, right? That's going to be about 4 letters long, So yeah, no, that's a good way to go in and frame that. And I'm going to go off on a little bit of tangent here because it's interesting. So your mentor provided you advice as to how to go and do it, and yet you didn't necessarily meet that I guess goal or what you wanted to actually accomplish in the end, right? Like it still made a lot of different work. You did what you had to go and do based off of the mentorship advice. And I don't want to necessarily say the advice given to you was poor, but what would you how would you think it might be different in how that mentoring message works or and whatnot, right? Like in terms of the advice they provided, because for me, I work as a coach and it's a little bit of a different approach, but I would be interested in your perspective of how mentorship has worked for and against you.
Yeah, it comes down to being an order taker versus critical thinking. And I know that again sounds obvious, but I spent a lot of my career early, especially being an order taker, just get as much done as possible. If your leader, boss, manager is saying do this, I was the first to get it done. So it became a checklist. It became routine, and that actually didn't show value. It created deliverables, but it didn't create as much value as it could do. And sometimes I was passed over for promotions and realized that, okay, something's wrong here. I'm putting in all this hard work, but not getting the recognition I thought I deserved.
Right.
So to your point around when you're asked to do something or when you're asking someone to do something, always provide your thought, perspective, interpretation on that. And if anything, play it back. So if a leader says, hey, I need you to go deliver this e-commerce project, here's what I take from it. Here's what I'm seeing it do in terms of the facts, feelings, functionality. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Because then you're really checking the understanding rather than spending months or weeks on a task to find out it's wrong.
Right. And I think there's also maybe a bias involved where because it's coming from your leader, because it's coming from someone that's more experienced, you're kind of like, yeah, of course they're right. Why did I think about that at first? And you don't think about it because you've assumed that advice already comes with that critical thinking thrown in there, perhaps.
Yes. Yeah. I can't remember the movie or TV show, but there was a comment around if the boss asks you to go wash his car, you go wash his car.
Right.
And this was decades ago, but it stuck with me. And I was like, okay, that's how work works.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. Don't get me wrong. There are times when you're serving customers, there's a critical issue. Some of the careers around emergency services, for example, or military or forces, there's things you need to do. You take instruction and get it done, absolutely. Mm-hmm. But most of the corporate environment that we work in, there's an opportunity to just apply a sense check for that task, to check your understanding, play it back, and then make sure everyone has a clear understanding of what you're delivering before you spend too long doing it.
No, that's a good way to go and point out there. And I guess when you're working through some of these, I'll say lessons learned from large IT projects, like what else have you noticed that can kill a project really quickly?
I would say clarity. So making sure you know exactly what's being done. And it's, again, easy to say clarity, but it's just playing it back and communication. I always use the rule of 7 times for communication, because we often share a message to our teams about a deadline change or a new person coming on board or a new role we have to take on. And then a week later, someone asks you about that information and they're not clear on it. And you wonder why. I said that last week. It was in the email. I spoke about it at the leadership team or whatever. But it's repetition, and don't get frustrated. I did hear there's a science behind the 7 times. I think actually it comes from I might be misquoting here, but the telephone numbers being 7 digits, right, because you can easily remember that number of things, is because that 7 times really helps it get in your brain in terms of that's the message, instruction, action, piece of information I need to retain. Mm-hmm. So don't get frustrated with having to repeat yourself, because most people, me, you, everyone included, need to hear some things many times for it to sink in, interpret, and then apply.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a good point. And I think even for me, along with repetition, is also making it memorable, right? So for me, I like to go and couple it sometimes with just weird, absurd analogies, just so they can remember what our approach was and why we're doing things, right? Like, I don't know why. I like to go and use food sometimes as an analogy, like you're ordering food or maybe it's a buffet or something like that, and somehow relating that back only because everyone eats, right? There's something that they can relate to, and then hopefully take that away to make it, that key message a little bit more memorable. Now, if we're having a date change, I'm not sure how much I can actually make it any more memorable other than this is the new date, right? No, but I think that's key, because sometimes I think when we looked at the results, I think from Pulse of the Profession, and this is a little bit dated because I think it's from 2017 and whatnot, like over 75% of project failures are like some form of communication failure. Like we're seeing it either in possibly requirements not being gathered correctly, or the executives aren't giving enough strategic direction, or the people aren't aligned on the objectives or goals. stakeholders aren't trained, whatever it might be, right? They're all little different forms of communication failure that happen. And so if we can't make these ideas stick, if we can't communicate them, like to me, that seems to be like the biggest villain in a lot of the different projects. I know people like to think, oh, my villain is this person, right? It's that stakeholder, it's that executive, it's maybe this sponsor and whatnot, right? But I mean, even if you replace a person, it usually happens that the villain is something that's innocuous, that's lurking in the background, that isn't addressed by just one single person. Could be the communication of the team. It could be multiple different things and complexities involved into it. And that kind of amalgamates itself into, oh my gosh, this is what we're really battling here. It's not just that person, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I love your analogy to analogies, because making stories fun is something I'm really trying to do more and more. And I find when I do it, it really makes a difference.
Yeah.
For example, we're doing a technology stack diagram to look at the layer of technologies involved in a very complex system and application.
Yeah, I'm bored already. Now you got to make it stick, right?
Yeah, so I called it a layer cake. It's a cake. We're building up the layers of the cake with the icing, and these are all the components of the application. And now people are referring to that layer cake.
Yeah,
I talked about a house move. A house build. You have the blueprints and architecture plans for a build. You then build the house, and then someone ultimately takes the keys from the house and owns the house going forward. And that's the difference between a project and operations. The project team builds the house. The operations team is the people living in the house. Mm-hmm. So we talk about them in terms of homeowners or customers. And again, it just helps with the translation of terminology and projects into the making sure they're successful.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think about one project that I did, and it was part of the project was looking at the APIs and how some of the messaging is going back and forth between different systems. And some people were proposing doing all these other extra things on. I viewed it as scope creep. I'm just like, look, guys, we have a toilet, and you guys are trying to go and gold plate the plumbing inside of there. No one's going to see it. We just need to make sure it works. We don't need to make it out of gold or platinum or whatever. We just need to make sure that it works. So if it's beyond that, then we need a conversation, because if we're trying to gold plate all of the plumbing underneath the toilet, like, we got a problem. Yeah, and so that kind of stuck, which then everyone kind of thinks about that toilet and be like, all right, what am I doing? Should we be adding it or not? Yeah. So when we look at some of the other areas of I think there's some myths that sometimes associate themselves with, being able to go and run their business and being able to work through it. And IT projects are definitely a large part of it. What are the biggest myths that need to get dispelled, especially for businesses that are looking to implement technology, but they're also trying to move out of the startup phase and into a more scalable organization?
Yeah, it's from my work. I do a lot of work with the Innovate Calgary on the Expert Advisor program, looking at early starting companies and sometimes students and people coming into business for the first time. And it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy sharing my knowledge around this. And one of the trends I've seen over the years, and because I went through this myself, is it's about assets, not activity. And what I mean there is it's not about hard work, although that's important, but the real growth comes from showing your value, creating something of value to other people, not just working hard for activity's sake, which is really easy to do in a business, because as a founder, CEO, there's always things to do. There's always something, be it invoicing all the way through to meeting customers, investors, website maintenance, and you can't do it all. So it's really thinking, okay, there's washing to be done. I always do the analogy. Everyone's got to do load the dishwasher or do washing. There's some chores you have to do to keep the lights on. But there's also making sure you spend time every day stepping back on what's the outcome or result that I need to achieve for my business today or my project today. because then you're not thinking, then you're not creating a to-do list, you're not creating a task list, although that's important. You're creating some outcomes, things that must get done today, no matter what.
Right. I think about sometimes those other startups and a lot of the founders. And I know this is hard because it's like you're always focused on everything that needs to get done. And you're working not 9 to 5, you're working like 12 to 12 to try and get everything done. And as soon as you start bringing people, there's a struggle because there's almost a mismatch of mindset that happens sometimes of, well, I used to do this. I want you to be like me, to be able to go and deliver the quality of tasks and activities that I think need to get done. And then as soon as they try and scale, then that's where it becomes very difficult or can create a lot of toxicity inside of the culture, right? And for me, when I look at project culture, it has to come from the top down and be supported in that way. That, hey, it's not the amount of time you're necessarily putting into anything, but to your point, what are the outcomes we're going to have out of it? But if someone's not being seen as working, those 12 hours a day, then all of a sudden you're seen as being non-productive and whatnot, and then it just gets in the way of a lot of the scaling that an organization could be doing. So for you, I mean, when you talk with a lot of these founders, whether it's from Innovate Alberta or anywhere across the world, like what do you see as the mindset shifts that need to happen?
Interesting. It's difficult because every person has a different mindset coming into a business. So the first thing I do is look at, well, what are they focused on? Because typically in any business, you have a visionary, the big picture, ideas person. I want to change the world, the Elon Musk of the world, get to Mars.
Right.
And then you have the integrators, the people who are behind the scenes, the systems, typically project managers, delivering the operators doing the work. And you need both for a successful company. You need the big goals, the big lofty ambitions, and you also need to follow through with delivery. And when a founder starts, they have to perform both roles, which is difficult but needed because it's just you.
Right.
So you're that big hairy goals and also the integrator to make it deliver. I'm naturally more of an integrator, so I've had to learn the visionary skill and then also build my team and bring in the experts to build out the skills that I need to deliver, because every business needs a combination of that visionary, the technicians, and the third role I'd also add is the navigator, someone to actually share the value, direct the teams, but get recognition for the teams in terms of delivery. Mm-hmm. So going back to your question around what's that skill that they need or that focus area, is the first one is recognize the skill you have best and then either learn the other skills you need or bring in experts, partners, people to help you build out the other skills you need, because you need that visionary integrator and navigator.
Mm-hmm. So if you were to go and say the integrator is the project manager role you're seeing?
Yes. Yeah, typically, yes. You do get visionary project managers, but generally speaking, the project manager role is more of an integrator because you're bringing together different teams to deliver.
All right. And so if the integrator or project manager had one superpower that you would be like, above all, they must have this in order to help that organization succeed, what would that be and why?
I could have a lot of fun on this. So it might be sometimes you want to be invisible, the invisible man.
Okay.
Sometimes you want to be Superman and completely bulletproof for everything. But where my head goes to on this is the superhero skill that most project managers and leaders need is to be the Hulk. And the reason I say that is because, and I'm not talking about smashing things.
Well, that's too bad. That's where I was going. They need to turn green. They need to turn colors.
It's the building strength from the stress and anger and situation, because often in project management, we all have days where we have just crushing overwhelm. We burn out. We don't know what to do next. And it's realizing that this too shall pass, this time will move on. Most often than not, people aren't dying from our projects, so things will move on and get better. But more importantly, just know that this is normal in any project. There's ups and downs, and take that stress, that pressure, that overwhelm, and take a next step. And sometimes it's as simple as getting up and moving around. Sometimes it's a case of talking to someone, getting advice. And sometimes it's a complete reset of the project and restarting. But taking a next action when you're feeling that stress, in terms of Hulk, taking that stress and anger and then doing something, is the one superpower skill I'd say they need.
Okay, but not smashing a desk. That's not part of it? No? Okay. That's too bad. Yeah. I mean, if I build on that and I'll choose a different one, I'd say for me, I think you want to be like, well, Wolverine's obviously an easy one, right? Of around resilience, always constantly healing, but being very aggressively tenacious on things, right? But to choose a different one, I almost want to say it's like being Professor X. You kind of need to be a telepath and know what everyone is thinking, including yourself, to be able to work through some of these other problems and such. But yeah, no, that's really great. Yeah. Now, for you, how can people find out more about you, find out more about AI Control Tower, and being able to go and help more organizations? Where can they find more information about all these things?
Yeah, for sure. Reach out on LinkedIn. I'm often posting on there. Send me a direct message and I'll send you a quick free roadmap on how to deliver AI projects in the 4 stages that we use for all of our projects. It's a free toolkit, no sign up. All you have to do is just DM toolkit on my LinkedIn profile. And they can also reach out on my website, which is wedeliveryourvision.com.
Awesome. So John's LinkedIn profile, it's going to be in the show notes there. So go and check him out. John, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure having you.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Ben.